So I'm very honored to share with you music that's been a large part of my professional life, and that's Neeraj's Infinity series. Constructed through the integer model of mathematical operations applied to any given interval, Neeraj's Infinity series produces unique avenues for musical composition and is the foundation of many of Neeraj's most pivotal percussion works. Today I'll show how his Infinity series is a distinctively Danish take on modernism and a compelling way in which fractal mathematics can be used to create structure, energy, and drama in percussion music. So many critics hailed Per Neeraj, born in 1932, as the next composer to carry the mantle of Danish nationalism after Carl Nielsen. One can hear this in his earliest of his 8 symphonies. But as with many composers, Neeraj was affected by the political and cultural changes that followed World War II, and it motivated him to travel beyond Europe for musical inspiration. Some of his earliest experiments in this period dealt with the avant-garde and minimalism, but he soon began developing compositional styles and techniques of his own. His compositional evolution included his development of the Infinity series in 1959, and later use of polar juxtapositions and moments of angularity and absurdity, inspired by the Swiss schizophrenic artist Adolf Wölfli. So from his early experiments in minimalism to his Wölfli-inspired music, one compositional technique that has had the most influence on Neeraj's work is his Unendlighetsskala, or Infinity series, a mathematical sequence with fractal properties that he developed as a way to create pitch material for his compositions. This music draws upon his experiences in Eastern cultures, philosophies, and music, including his travels to Bali from 1975 to 1980. The fractal characteristics he discovered within his Infinity series predates most of the scientific knowledge and language that was developed as part of the mathematical chaos theories of the late mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot in the 1980s. The rhythmic incarnation of the Infinity series, which he calls sun and moon music, is the basis of much of Per Neeraj's percussion writing. So the underlying principle of the Infinity series is that of a fractal nature. So when used to generate a melodic line, the pitch material that's created never repeats sequentially, but rather contains various levels of what he calls hierarchies that can be extracted, much like Sierpinski's triangle. The form of the Infinity series that Neeraj developed for this use in percussion writing is a fractal formation based on 2 elements in a 4-note sequence: bright, dark, dark, bright. Bright represents the sun, and dark represents the moon. This is a direct reference to the Eastern ideas of yin and yang in the philosophies in the I Ching. Hence Neeraj's term, sun and moon music. In his percussion writing, the bright and dark notes are generally represented by opposing colors and timbres of related instruments. So not only can the bright and dark elements in the sequence represent single sonic events, but they can also be assigned to represent 4-note cells that follow the same bright, dark, dark, bright construction. In this case, a bright cell would be bright, dark, dark, bright, and a dark cell would be dark, bright, bright, dark. So these cells are then ordered according to the same structure, resulting in a 16-note pattern: bright, dark, dark, bright, dark, bright, bright, dark, dark, bright, bright, dark, bright, dark, dark, bright. So this process can be repeated infinitely, revealing the fractal nature of the series. These rhythmic structures can also be layered vertically in Neeraj's hierarchies. So if every 4th or 16th or 64th note is extracted downwards, it'll result in the same bright, dark, dark, bright construction as the original series. Here you can see how the fractal nature of the series allows the iterations to line up together as bright or dark, whether they're moving at the 16th note level or the whole note level. So in sun and moon music, the rhythmic possibilities become the focal point of Neeraj's compositions. He devised a collection of motifs based on the basic series by removing certain notes within the series, which he calls rhythm melodies. So the basic way, or the best way I should say, to understand sun and music is to engage in it. So I'd ask your help in engaging it here today with me. So what we're going to do is play first just the basic series, the top line. We'll play the bright note, which is above the line, by clapping, and we'll stamp our foot for the dark note. Okay? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Very good. So that's 2 measures. Does anyone know which of the 2 measures we would repeat if we were to continue on in the series? It would be the second measure, and then you would do the first measure, and then you would do an inversion of that entire thing that you just played, and do that twice, and then do the original. So as you can see, the longer you go in the series, the more it starts to exhibit those fractal characteristics. Now, Neeraj, 2 of the first rhythm melodies that he has, something he calls right, which is just playing all the bright notes. So let's all do that together. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Very good. And then, of course, we can combine or separate with different players. So now what we'll do is, those of you on the right will play the right or the bright notes, and those of you on the left will play the dark or the left notes. Okay? So why don't all of you on the left do foot stamping still? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Very good. So now these are just the most basic rhythm melodies, but of course Neeraj explores other possibilities in these rhythm melodies. A motif that Neeraj often uses in his writing is called the P-shup, and that's performed by playing a dead stroke on the second of the tied notes, giving that note little or no emphasis. This pattern can also be played without the second note, which creates a uniquely syncopated rhythm. So I'm going to demonstrate the P-shup here. Without tripping on any chords as I trip. So as you can see, the P-shup really creates a sort of syncopated and groove-hiding feel in the way that it represents the series. So this is just one of many examples that, when combined with the use of different hierarchies and orchestrated across a wide array of percussion instruments, can generate polyrhythmic music that's full of color and texture, yet in complete harmony of this bright, dark, dark, bright construction. So there's some underlying philosophical ideas behind the music of the Infinity series, especially Sun and Moon music, that are very important to consider. In Denmark, the idea of social inclusion and common welfare are deeply held beliefs. One such example of this can be seen in the state-sponsored community music schools that exist for youth and adults to enrich their lives. Neeraj's compositions involving hierarchy in the Infinity series can be seen as a response to this cultural belief. In Sun and Moon music, the most advanced and technically proficient musician can be equally engaged in music making with younger or more amateur players who might play a slower moving iteration of the series, not unlike the gamelan ensemble from Indonesia. Neeraj addresses this directly with his ensemble book on the Infinity series titled Tromboken. Within it, he presents a number of exercises and 3 percussion ensemble compositions that exhibit Sun and Moon music. So Neeraj's open hierarchy then can be viewed not as a rigid or dictatorial structure in these compositions, but rather something that is open and limitless and part of his own philosophical vision of an all-inclusive art that fosters synthesis, harmony, and coexistence. Neeraj expresses this in his seminal percussion ensemble work, In Listima, A Light Hour, which was premiered and recorded in 2009. The work is in 4 parts, each approximately 15 minutes in length, and with a clear formal structure of A, B, B, A, or of course, as we know, bright, dark, dark, bright. The performers are given rhythms, dynamics, and gestural phrasing ideas, but the instrumentation is left up to the ensemble. In this work, I believe Neeraj's genius truly comes out in the sun and moon music of the piece. Let's take a quick listen to just a little bit of the second movement, and you'll hear the fastest moving iteration of the series in the bongos, which happens to be me. So. So the ancient mystical text I Ching was the inspiration for Per Neeraj's percussion solo in the same name, written in 1982. It's written for and premiered by the famed Danish percussionist Gert Mortensen. It's a virtuosic tour de force in 4 movements. I Ching is particularly unique because it synthesizes the Infinity series with different compositional principles of a number of Neeraj's other stylistic periods. In particular, the work connects the more minimalist ideas of his first percussion solo Waves, written in 1969, to his Infinity series, while also including his first experimentations with a more polarizing, angular music inspired by the visual art and writing of Adolf Wulfli, a Swiss artist who suffered from schizophrenia. The 4th movement of I Ching utilizes pairs of instruments to outline this Infinity series. Bass drum versus Balinese Jing cymbals, the concert tom versus Chinese tom, the low gong versus the high gong are juxtapositions of dark and bright percussion sounds. Now, when written across a percussion grand staff, it can be rather difficult to extract the Infinity series from the music. For this reason, Neeraj gives us a representation of how he originally conceived and wrote down the movement, shown on the slide. Here he clearly shows how the series delineates various hierarchical layers and various note heads to represent the different instruments. Neeraj disguises and augments the Infinity series and his rhythm melodies with orchestration, accents, rests, double notes, and the use of various dynamics. In the opening music, the toms serve as the 16th note-based iteration of the series, while the bass drum and the Balinese cymbals maintain the largest iteration every 4th measure. The gongs both replace the relative tom notes, as their iteration of the series occurs every 2 measure intervals. So let's take a listen to the very opening of I Ching, and you'll hear that the character of this work is very different than what we just heard in A Light Hour. So another property of the infinity series that Neeraj discovered in the early 1970s is something he calls wavelengths. He found that if one selects every third pitch or fifth or ninth or any particular interval of the original series, the resulting series, when extracted, is a completely new sequence of pitches, but this new series will possess the exact same hierarchical or fractal principles that the original series possesses. Neeraj applies this process into his composition Nemo Dynamo for solo percussionist and computer-controlled sounds. Written in 1989 for percussionist Gert Sorensen, Neeraj layers hierarchies and wavelengths, for example, 4, 7, and 11. In addition, he moves between different hierarchies and wavelengths on pairs of percussion instruments with increasing frequency. In this way, he's able to create temporal motion to the listener sounds like accelerandi, but in fact are rhythmic iterations of the basic underlying infinity series. So I'll play a little bit of an excerpt of Nemo Dynamo, and as you listen, watch in particular my right hand for the various hierarchies of the infinity series moving through the pairings of instruments. So there's a pair of bongos, a pair of rototoms, and then the concert toms. So I'll play just a little bit of this for you to hear. All right, so before I perform an abridged version of the entire work, Nemo Dynamo, I'd like to share a little bit of Neeraj's words about the piece and composing it. He says, quote, "The real challenge to us as humans is that computers, robots, can in fact achieve far more than we can today in terms of physical performance. And I've used this as a kind of image of the fact that this computer produces sample percussion sounds and does so with incredible tempo, precision, and of course, whilst the soloist is able to kind of skate or surf over these sounds, because of course he knows what is happening and can build up the series on his instruments. He can catch a theme that comes rushing out of the computer, he can draw this theme out and slow it down or accelerate it as he wishes. In other words, he can play it just as Captain Nemo would play and sail around and steer his submarine." I'd like to open the floor for questions. One area that I wish I had a little bit more time to talk about was his melodic infinity series, but if you have some questions or if you'd like to actually see the mathematical formulas, we can do that. But of course, whatever questions first that you might have. Okay. Questions, anyone? Would you like to I mean, if we have a minute or two, do we have a minute or two? If you'd like, I can walk you through the melodic series if you're interested. So let me just pull up those slides. Now, the melodic series Neeraj uses, the first composition to do this was the Second Symphony, and in particular a work called Voyage into the Golden Screen, where he uses the first 10,000 or 1,024 notes in the flute. Let me just bring up the slide here. So first of all, let me just talk about this melodic series. So in the case of the percussion series, we're working with just two elements, right? We have sort of a binary infinity series. In the melodic series, it in fact grows exponentially outwards. So if you can, So if you can see here, if we wanted to construct the melodic series, what we would need to do is we start with a semitone, okay? And then we measure that interval. In this case, we would measure it as +1, right? It's going up in a half step. So we would project this interval twice. So first by inverting the interval, so now we make it -1, and we'll apply that to the first pitch. So that G will then, the third pitch will become F sharp, down -1. Then we will take the interval as is, +1, and we'll apply that to the second pitch to give us the fourth. So A flat becomes A natural. So then, after we have 4 notes, we do this again by measuring the next interval from note 2 to 3, which is -2, it's going down 2 half steps. So we'll apply this the same way. We'll apply first the inverse, +2, and then we'll apply, as is the interval, -2 to the next 2 notes. So that gives us then A flat and G. And so you can keep doing this and continue all the way through. Now, for all of you mathematicians out there, how does this look mathematically? This is, in fact, the mathematical series formula. So if you can see, if we take the 4th entry of the table of values, where n equals 4, and C of 4 then equals 1, then you can see -C of 4 equals C of 8, which is -1 or F sharp. And C of 4 plus 1 equals C of 9, which is A. So that's the mathematical representation of this. And there's a couple papers actually where, in mathematical papers, there's a computer scientist actually here in Canada, I'm forgetting what institution he's affiliated with, but he's listed in some of the references in the handout. He's working actually on a paper working with this melodic series and just some of the mathematical properties, just solely from a pure mathematical basis. So hopefully that paper, I think he's working to publish that in Music and Mathematics Journal, so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. But essentially that's the melodic series. And then if you, if I can get back to the slide where the melodic series was. There it is. So you can see the series continuing forward. If you were, say, to take the first note, every 4th note, so the first note G, then the 5th note A flat, then the next measure F sharp, then beat 2, the second measure A natural, you can see that they're the same notes of every 8th note. So it's got the same fractal hierarchical principles that we talked about in the percussion series, which creates, again, this idea of layering. And in a sense, that's what Neeraj does. I do have a little bit of the Voyage into the Golden Screen here.
on a slide if you'd like to see how that score looks. So that's just the opening. So you can see the flute has the series in eighth notes, and then he's extracted different iterations in the other orchestrated parts. Do I have the example? Do you want to listen to a little bit of it, if you're curious? So that's just a tiny bit, but you can hear it's got a unique sound to it. For me, I find the melodic series, and of course, I think the rhythmic series for us as percussionists, it's really great for us to really grab onto the rhythmic quality, especially in an example like A Light Hour. I think the melodic series, when you first look at the mathematics of it, can be kind of unwieldy, but when you listen to it, it sort of, for me, it sort of goes beyond those mathematics. There's a certain beauty to it, and for me, it really speaks to sort of the unique nature of the series. Now, in I Ching, of course, the fourth movement has the inferior series in a lot of different ways. There's also a four-note element where the sequence goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 4, 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3, 4. So you can sort of do it in four-note element as well. And actually, the octobon part that I played in Nemo Dynamo, it used that version of the Infinity series as well. So there's sort of endless possibilities. So, all right, thank you very much. Thank you.